Well, I appreciate this chance to meet with you all. I have been attending quite a number of these and really enjoyed it. I was very excited to learn from Bree when that there would be a club here, and I just arrived this year, so it was perfect timing. I look forward to more next year. So let me just start out with a question. What do you think of when you think of the U.S. military and energy security? What comes to mind?
Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya.
Oil.
Good start. Oil. Okay.
Power plants.
Right. What else? War, oil.
Terrorism.
Terrorism, yeah. Yeah.
Taxes.
What's that?
Taxes.
Taxes. Like American taxes, U.S. taxes, to pay for all of their shipping? Okay, that's a good point. Yeah.
Logistics.
Logistics, right. Very good point. Yeah.
Supply lines.
Supply lines, right. Yeah. Okay, good. We'll touch on all of this. We'll touch on this and beyond a little bit. Much of the world's oil, as you know, you already mentioned it here, comes from countries with leaders that are difficult. They violate human rights. They don't agree with our approach to solving critical global issues. None of these three were happy about the no-fly zone, right, for example. Protecting sea lanes, transporting oil, exacts a huge price tag in dollars. You guys have mentioned this. Dependency on importing oil undermines our economic stability. Most oil is now in the control of national companies across the world. There's only about 10% by private companies. ExxonMobil, top 15 companies, ownership of oil reserves, not there. Biggest oil company in the world, right? So we don't own the oil reserves anymore. Oil that is left is hard to get to, threatens the environment, and getting to it threatens the environment, and requires advanced technologies. So private U.S. companies with the technology that would be necessary to get to this hard-to oil and upstream projects have a hard time getting in because the countries that you see above are either nationalized or renationalizing. And our economy is dangerously dependent on foreign oil, right? 13 million barrels of oil imported every 24 hours. We're 4% of the world's population. We're consuming a quarter of the world's oil. And U.S. consumption is actually rising, an average of 2% annually. And the U.S. government is the biggest purchaser of energy in the United States. It's half of the U.S. trade deficit is our oil debt, and weakens our international leverage. Okay, and if that wasn't bad news, here's the other bad news. Take a look at all of the security concerns regarding energy that we have just at the moment. Natural and man-made disasters in the U.S. It's taken out oil production facilities. Unrest in the Middle East. Latin American countries renationalizing oil companies and using supply for political gains, right? I'm thinking Hugo Chavez. Europe has gas conflicts with Russia regarding transit states. Ukraine not paying bills for supply. There is sabotage of facilities in Iraq. Nigerian supplies interrupted by civil conflict. North Korea and Iran have nuclear ambitions. There are threats to oil transit in the Straits of Malacca, Straits of Hormuz, and all the while, Chinese and India demand is multiplying. So I thought about this. I thought about when I started to teach energy and national security, and I was going to give this lecture on the military. And I thought, I spent 6 years in the Department of Defense, mostly in the Office of Secretary of Defense. And it was from the mid-90s to the early 2000s. It was before I left and did my doctorate. And in all of my 6 years, in all my meetings, from issues pertaining to acquisition of weapons systems, bilateral meetings with foreign counterparts, policy concerning states, foreign states, former Soviet states, training and equipping NATO partners, the word energy was never uttered. It was never in the Quadrennial Defense Review. It was never in the strategy document for the Department of Defense. The only time I recall energy being mentioned was after September 11, 2001, we were tasked by the Secretary of Defense to work with certain states in Central Asia to obtain refueling platforms for our operations in Afghanistan. That was the first time I remember it being mentioned. So what I want to point out here today is that DoD actually has come a long way since 2001. When you think of the U.S. military and energy, do you think of, for example, any of these? Right? Do you think of how the U.S. Army, up at the top left there, is transforming its fleet of 70,000 non-tactical vehicles to hybrids and electric, as well as demonstrating this tactical vehicle, this hybrid tactical vehicle? It's called the RSTV. It's a technology demonstrator built entirely by General Dynamics to show that a military-sized vehicle with military capabilities can be hybrid. It's powered by 4 electric in-wheel motors, the small diesel engine powering a generator to charge onboard batteries. And I saw it at the MIT Energy Club conference earlier this month in Boston. They parked it right outside the hotel. And the really cool thing about this green military vehicle is that it can export 20 kilowatts of power to the grid. And since it uses hybrid technology, it can roam around silently, right, which is pretty important on the battlefield. Or do you think about the U.S. Navy launching the first military vessel with a hybrid engine? This is the USS Macon Island. It's expected to save $250 million in fuel over its life system. It has an engine which is 35,000 horsepower, and it gets underway in 1 hour versus 3 days for diesel ships and others. Granted, it on less than 10 knots, it uses electric, and faster it switches. Okay, then there's the Swift boat, right? This is the Corvette of the Navy. As of October 2010, it was certified to run on algae fuels, and now there's about 20 of them in plan. They're going to call it the Great Green Fleet. Or do you think about the Green Hawk up there? It's an unmodified F-18 Super Hornet using 50-50 blend of camelina source biofuel and a transitional JP5 fuel. Did you know tomorrow, over the Phillies game, the U.S. Air Force is going to fly a jet propelled by biofuel? Now, closer to home, Fort Knox has mandated the energy to cut energy use by 20% by 2015. They've been mandated. So they're using geothermal energy to heat and cool 450 buildings, saving $8 million per year, and they've already met their target. Or I bet you don't think of the mighty Marines in Afghanistan, right? Helmand Province. This is the 3rd Battalion, 5th Regiment. Lost 16 guys, I think, in the first month. It's a tough duty. In the meantime, they're using wind and solar energy to power everything from battery packs to cooling heating systems in living quarters, operation centers. They have 2 patrol bases already. They're fully equipped with this, and reducing fuel requirements 90%. And they're able to conduct 3-week foot patrol without battery supply. It reduces their load 700 pounds when they're out on patrol. So since 2000, the Air Force has played a leading role in DoD efforts to test and evaluate alternative fuels. So this isn't new. And the U.S. Air Force has a goal to have 50% aviation fuels from alternative sources, from domestic alternative sources by 2016. And the United States Navy has the goal of 50% alternative fuels by 2020. And the U.S. Army provides the testing ground for all these fuel qualification processes. So this just came in my inbox this week, hot off the presses. The United States Marine Corps has an expeditionary energy strategy and implementation plan. It's called Basis to Battlefield. You can see the vision. They want to be the premier self-sufficient